Welcome to tonight's horror compilation. We have 7 terrifying stories from Reddit. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare to be disturbed. Our next story. I shouldn't have spied on my neighbor. I need to get this off my chest. I live in your standard middle-class neighborhood, one where all the lawns are neat, green, and tidy, and there's virtually no crime. The neighbor to the left of me, a kind older woman, is one of the sweetest women I've ever met. She has never been a problem. The neighbor to my right, however, is a different story. In all my years of living here, I've never caught his name. From rumors around the neighborhood, he's a divorcee with his longtime wife of 30 years. Apparently, he lost custody of both kids due to his tendencies, and since then, he's stuck to himself. The issues arise, however, when the sun goes down. From my window at the ... dead of night, I've only ever seen one room lit in his house. His upstairs bedroom. From this room, I hear constant, awful mechanical whirring. To me, it sounds as if he's crushing something. Something hard. Something thick, layered, and bony. It makes me sick thinking of what he could be doing in there. The worst part? My wife has never heard the sounds herself. Like clockwork, I jostle her awake, and by the time she's by the window, the sounds have ceased completely. It's as if he's toying with me, taunting me. I've devolved into tucking my daughter into bed and standing by my bedroom window in the total ... darkness of my house until the sun once again rises and the light in that room shuts off. It has been months, and I had enough. I had to get a closer look. I know how you're going to judge my next actions. I know you'll probably think I should have called the police or tried something safer. But you don't understand the unbearable, morbid curiosity that's been gnawing at me like a disease. I had to know what was in that room. I was going to find out. I called in sick for work that morning, and I staked the neighbor's house out. Patiently, I waited by the dining room window, kissing my wife goodbye and sending my daughter off to school. Patiently, I counted the seconds, minutes, hours it took, until finally, I saw the neighbor's car exiting the driveway. After waiting 5 minutes ensuring he wouldn't return, I hurriedly exited my house and hopped his fence, tiptoeing to his back door. I gently tested the back doorknob, praying for an easy entry. To my surprise, the door gave way and opened. It had been unlocked. Immediately upon entry, I was thrashed by a putrid, rotten smell. This smell enveloped my head and made me instantly doubt my decisions to come in. Despite the smell, however, my curiosity got the best of me, and like a hook in my chest, I was drawn to the staircase leading to the second-floor bedroom. Slowly, calculated, I took a step one by one, making my way to the top. With each creak of the old, weathered, cracked staircase, my brain screamed at me to turn around. Something deep inside me was telling me to leave. I was in danger. But something deeper in me told me to push forward. The sounds, the sleepless nights, the sheer, unparalleled desire to see what was up these stairs ultimately propelled me to take my final steps and make it to the top of the staircase. Upon reaching the top, however, I instantly heard something. A dampened, weak groan. It belonged to a woman. I slowly made my way to the source of the sound, the bedroom. I stood there for a second. The door was closed. As I stood there, I felt the doorknob staring at me, egging me on to open the door and get to the bottom of what's been eating at me for so long. Before I could even think otherwise, my hand started moving slowly to the doorknob, mere inches away from contact. Then, a voice. It was the woman. Please. No. Don't do this. You're not a monster. You can take the kids back. Just let me free with my leg. You've already taken everything else. My eyes widened as my brain connected the dots. Was she the ex-wife? Did this mean? Before I could grasp the doorknob and see this ... horror. For myself, my phone rang, startling me, making me jump back with an audible gasp. The woman, realizing I was not her husband, broke out into a desperate, panicked yell. At once, she begged me to release her, that if I didn't, I was complicit and I was responsible for her torture. In the midst of all this, however, was my ringing phone. No caller ID flashed across the screen. Already knowing who it was, I clicked accept call and slowly raised the phone to my ear. A low, gruff, freakishly calm voice spoke. "I know where you are. I know what you've seen. You think you broke in. I let you in. I played you like a fiddle." I meekly responded, I'm calling the police." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the voice responded. "I'm sitting in the parking lot outside your daughter's school. For her sake, you should turn around and leave. You're bluffing. You can't escape your actions," I weakly stated, trying to convince myself more than anyone. 6600 to Workshire Lane, 1241 Forest Road. As my wife and daughter's current locations rang through my ears, he continued. "Your wife gets off work at 3 and picks your daughter up at 3:30. Your daughter has ballet lessons from 5 to 6 p.m. and you pick her up 5 minutes late every single time. I've been watching you. You are not in control. If you know what's best for you ... For your family, you're going to back away from the door, leave the house, and never speak of this to anyone. Understand?" Before I could respond, the line cut and I was left standing there, with the woman on the other side pleading with me. Stone-faced and without another word, I slowly turned around and made my way down the stairs. I exited the house and without looking back, made my way to my own front door. It's been 3 weeks since that incident, and the metallic crunching sounds have continued. I feel stuck. I want to help the woman. But sitting here, on my bed, typing this next to my wife and my daughter in my arms, I need to prioritize my own family. No matter the cost. And that was just the beginning of tonight's ... Horror Compilation. Story 2. I live above an apartment that doesn't exist. I'm posting this here because I don't know who else to tell, and I don't want to talk about it out loud anymore. We moved into our apartment 6 months ago. It's a newer building, clean, quiet, expensive enough that we assumed we wouldn't have to deal with weird neighbor issues. My wife liked that it felt safe. Our kids liked that everything smelled new. The first time we heard the noise below us, I didn't think anything of it. It was late around 1030 p.m. and it sounded like someone moving furniture. A scrape. A soft thud. Then footsteps. Heavy ones. I remember looking at my wife and joking, "Guess the people downstairs are redecorating." She frowned. "There isn't anyone downstairs," she said. I told her she was wrong. Every apartment has someone below it. The next morning, she called the leasing office. They told her our unit was the ground floor. There is no apartment below us. We laughed it off. Buildings make noise. Pipes shift. Sound travels strangely. That explanation held for about a week. Then the noises changed. We started hearing things that sounded familiar. A chair dragging in the same pattern as ours. A cabinet closing exactly the way ours does when you don't push it all the way. Footsteps pacing at night matching the rhythm of someone walking back and forth in our living room. One night, my son asked why the other family was arguing so loudly. I froze. What other family? He looked at me like I was stupid. "The one downstairs," he said. "They sound just like us." We hadn't told the kids about the noises. After that, it escalated fast. We'd sit down for dinner, and 10 minutes later, we'd hear plates clinking below us. We'd watch a movie, and faint laughter would echo up delayed. But identical. Once, I heard my own voice coming through the floor, finishing a sentence I hadn't said yet. That was the first time I tried to confront it. I went downstairs. I stood in the hallway where our apartment should have been mirrored below. There was nothing there. Just a wall. No door. No seams. No sign that a unit had ever existed. When I came back up, my wife was pale. "They were quiet while you were gone," she said. "Then they started moving again. Like they were awaiting. Things started going missing. Not disappearing, moving. My keys showed up under the couch downstairs one morning. A drawing my daughter made appeared folded neatly on the floor, near the vents. And then the noises started happening before we did. We'd hear footsteps below us, and minutes later someone in our family would walk the same path, like an echo running ahead of the sound. The breaking point came one night during a storm. The power flickered. The kids were asleep. My wife and I sat in the dark, listening. From below us, we heard a family talking quietly. Every voice matched ours. Every word was wrong. They were planning something. Calmly. Methodically. I couldn't hear everything. But I heard one sentence clearly spoken in my voice. Only one of us gets to leave. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember grabbing the kids. I remember my wife screaming my name. I remember the sound below us exploding into chaos, furniture slamming, footsteps racing, something slamming into the ceiling. We made it outside. The building looked normal. Quiet. Dark. The police came. They searched. They told us the same thing management did. There is no apartment below ours. My wife didn't come with us when we left. She said she needed to grab something she forgot. I waited in the car with the kids. She never came back out. The police searched again. Nothing. They say she must have left on her own. They say grief can make people imagine patterns. They say I'm lucky my children and I got out. But I still look for her. Sometimes when I'm driving through the neighborhood, I swear I see her standing near the edge of the lot or reflected in store windows as I pass. Every time I stop, she's gone. I've searched for her online too. Every account she had is still there. But it's like time stopped. No new photos. No comments. No messages. Just the same single post, repeated across every platform, pinned at the top like it's stuck there, still here. Sometimes late at night I hear footsteps below us. And sometimes, when I look at my hands, they don't feel like mine. This one is called I responded to a 911 call from my own house, part 3. https://www. reddit.com/r/horrorstories/s/jzd2 and iqbsu https://www. reddit.com or horrorstories asej7hn for 3x5zs. I stayed there longer than I should have. The phone still pressed to my ear, even after the line had gone ... dead ... For a few seconds, I thought maybe it hadn't disconnected at all. That if I stayed still enough, I'd hear something else. Breathing. A shift. Anything that proved the call hadn't ended on its own terms. Nothing came. I finally pulled the phone away and looked at the screen. Blocked number. That should have scared me more than it did. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. Like fear was still trying to catch up to whatever had already settled in my chest. Around me, the station carried on. Radios chirped. Someone laughed down the hallway. A printer whined as it spit out paperwork. Normal sounds. The kind you stop noticing after a few years. I lowered the phone and rested my elbows on the desk. The man's voice replayed in my head once, then faded. What wouldn't leave was the recording. Not the words. The way she spoke. I closed my eyes, trying to pin it down. Tried to tell myself I'd just listened to it too many times tonight, that my brain was looping something recent because it didn't know what else to do. But it wasn't that. There was something familiar there. Something older. I sat still and let my mind drift back, the way it does when you're too tired to control it. Years of calls blurred together. Domestics, disturbances, welfare checks, drunk drivers slurring their way through explanations. Voices stacked on top of voices until they lost all shape. Except hers. She didn't sound hysterical. She didn't sound calm either. She sounded like someone trying very hard to stay calm. Like she knew that if her voice cracked, if she cried, if she begged too much, it would make things worse. Please hurry. The words pressed in on me, carrying weight they hadn't before. I opened my eyes. Why was I being targeted? That was the first place my mind went. It always is. You spend enough time in this job, and you learn to assume there's a reason. A face you forgot. A name you didn't. Someone you crossed without realizing it. I ran through the usual list. An arrest gone bad? A family member of someone I put away? A witness who didn't like how things turned out. None of it fit. The call hadn't been angry. The voice hadn't been threatening. It sounded like a question that had been waiting a long time to be asked. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks like I used to on long nights. My mind pushed back hard then, like it always does when you get too close to something you don't want to see. I thought about the good calls. The ones that end the way you hope they will. The kid I pulled out of a wrecked sedan, still breathing. The woman on the overpass who decided to step back over the railing. The old man who grabbed my hand in the and said thank you like it mattered. I reminded myself I was good at this job. That I cared. That being tired didn't make me careless. Eventually, I stood up. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I sat down at a terminal in the corner and logged in, my fingers moving on muscle memory alone. I didn't search her name. I didn't type in an address. I didn't even pretend this was an investigation. I searched my badge number. Years of reports filled the screen. Page after page of my own words staring back at me. Clean. Professional. Efficient. Calls cleared. Situations resolved. Lives intersected ... And then moved on. For a moment, I felt relief. Then I started noticing repetition. The same apartment number. The same block. The same phrasing. Spread out over months. At first, the reports were longer. More detailed. More careful. Then, slowly, they weren't. The language tightened. The explanation shortened. The urgency dulled. I scrolled until my finger stopped on its own. The date was enough. I closed my eyes and let the years roll back. She hadn't started out frantic. The first time I responded, she'd been apologetic. Embarrassed, even. Said she thought someone was watching her. Said things in her apartment didn't feel right. Furniture shifted. Items missing. A man she kept seeing outside her building. I cleared the place. Found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No one lurking outside. I told her to call again if anything changed. She did. Again and again. Over the next few months, I answered more calls from that address than I could count. Sometimes I was the first unit. Sometimes backup. Same story every time. Same fear. Same lack of evidence. I kept responding. I kept checking. I kept finding nothing. Eventually, the calls started to blur together. Her voice lost its urgency in my mind. Became familiar in the wrong way. Predictable. Background noise in a long list of overnight complaints. I stopped seeing a woman who was scared. I started seeing a caller. I told myself I was being patient. Professional. That I was doing my job. What I was really doing was learning how to stop listening. The night it happened had already taken everything out of me. Earlier in the shift, I'd been one of the first on scene for an unresponsive toddler. I remembered the way his chest felt under my hands. The count in my head. The silence in the ambulance when they finally closed the doors. I didn't know if the kid was going to make it. I stayed on duty anyway. When her call came in later, I remember sighing into the radio before I keyed up. I remember thinking I just needed a minute. That I'd get there. That it wasn't urgent. I took my time. Not enough to look suspicious. Just enough to breathe. To sit in the patrol car and stare straight ahead instead of turning the wheel right away. When I finally arrived, the lights were on. The door was unlocked. She was already dead. Later, when detectives pulled surveillance from nearby buildings, the timeline filled itself in without asking my permission. The assailant entered her apartment. Left. Returned. Left again. The gap in the footage matched the time she was on the phone with dispatch. Matched the time I was sitting in my patrol car, convincing myself I already knew how the call would end. I stared at the report on the screen until the words stopped meaning anything. I failed that night. I didn't do my job the way I always did. with care and urgency. And now someone wanted to know if I remembered that. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy horror stories in audio form, I also narrate stories like this on my YouTube channel, where I focus on slow burn, atmospheric horror. YouTube, https://www. YouTube. Call me at staticvoices91. Let's move on to our next disturbing tale. Story number 4. Clear Mind. I saw the flyer the way you see most things when you're broke, exhausted, and too tired to feel embarrassed about it anymore. It was taped crookedly to a bulletin board outside the engineering advising office, half covered by a Lost Cat poster and a neon pink ad for same-day resume help. The paper was clean, glossy, and too expensive looking to belong in that hallway. Paid research opportunity. Focus and retention study. $1,800 compensation. No insurance required. 2 weeks. Limited slots. At the bottom was a logo in muted navy and gray, understated and professional. Hawthorne Clinical Research Partners. The name sounded like something that had been around forever, like a place that handled quiet, responsible science. Something with receptionists who wore cardigans and clipboards, people who said participant instead of subject. A place with calming music and free granola bars in the waiting room. I memorized the number without realizing I was doing it. At that point in the semester, my life had shrunk into a set of very boring emergencies. Rent. Overdraft fees. A cracked molar I kept ignoring because painkillers were cheaper than a dentist. My meal plan had run out 2 weeks early because I'd been saving money by skipping dinner, then failing, then eating the same overpriced snacks from the vending machine. Engineering didn't care if you were hungry. Westbridge University didn't care if you were drowning. I was a junior, which meant the weed out classes were behind me, and now everything was just relentless. Thermal systems, signals and controls, lab reports that felt like writing a small book every week, group projects with people who looked at you like you were defective if you couldn't keep up. I had always been good at school. Not genius good, just stubborn good. The kind of good that comes from doing what you're told and staying up late and convincing yourself it's normal. But that semester, something shifted. I couldn't focus. I'd read the same paragraph 5 times and still have no idea what it said. I'd stare at an equation and feel my brain slide off it like water off glass. My thoughts were constantly running, ... But none of them were useful. I was anxious all the time, and the anxiety made it harder to work, and that made the anxiety worse. It was the kind of spiral you don't notice until you're already halfway down. The flyer felt like a ladder. I called the number from the parking lot behind the engineering building, my fingers numb even though it wasn't that cold yet. A woman answered on the second ring, warm and practiced. Hawthorne Clinical Research Partners, this is Nadia. How can I help you today? Her voice made it sound simple. Like I wasn't about to sell off part of my brain for rent money. I'm calling about the focus and retention study, I said, trying to sound casual. The one at Westbridge. Great, she said immediately. We're screening participants this week. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? That fast. No suspicion. No hesitation. My stomach tightened with relief and something else, a quiet alarm I didn't know how to interpret. Yeah, I said. Tomorrow works. Perfect. I'll schedule you for a pre-screen at 2. Bring a photo ID, and please don't consume caffeine for 4 hours before your appointment. We'll take vitals and do a brief cognitive baseline assessment. Baseline. The word sounded like a line drawn under who I was before. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a second longer than I needed to. The screen reflected my face in a vague, dark way. Hollow-eyed. Jaw clenched. A kid pretending to be an adult. My name is Ethan Mercer. I grew up 2 hours south of Cedar Falls, in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the biggest ambition most people had was to leave. My mom worked nights at a nursing home. My dad wasn't in the picture. I'd been told my whole life that if I got a degree, If I got out, if I just kept pushing, everything would get easier. It never occurred to me to question that. The next day, I walked to Hawthorne Clinical Research Partners from campus. Cedar Falls was gray with early winter, the kind of flat light that makes everything feel like it's been drained. The facility sat in a quiet office park near the river, tucked between a tax firm and a place that sold ergonomic office chairs. If you didn't know it was there, you'd never notice it. The building was low and modern, pale brick and tinted windows. A discreet sign by the entrance. No big hospital feel, no sirens or chaos. Just calm. Inside, it smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly sweet, like vanilla. There was a small waiting room with 2 couches, a table stacked with outdated magazines, and a water dispenser that hummed softly. Nadia greeted me at the front desk. She looked like she belonged there, calm, organized, her hair pulled back neatly. She handed me a clipboard. "Just a few forms," she said. "Take your time." The forms were a lot. Pages of fine print about risks, side effects, confidentiality. Language that made my eyes glaze over. I tried to read carefully. But the words slid around, my brain already tired from being itself. I caught phrases like transient headache, temporary insomnia, mood changes, rare episodes of dissociation, elevated blood pressure, post-trial adjustment period. Post-trial adjustment period sounded like a polite way to describe something they didn't want to put in bold. A man in a white coat brought me back to an exam room. He introduced himself as Dr. Layton, and he had the kind of face you trust automatically, soft and mildly amused, like he'd seen every nervous participant and knew exactly what to say. "This is a short-term study," he explained, flipping through my paperwork. "We're examining a compound intended to support attentional control and memory encoding. Nothing experimental in the sci-fi sense, I promise." I laughed a little too hard at that, like I needed him to know I was normal. "We'll call it HCP-17 during the study," he continued. "You'll take 1 capsule in the morning, once a day, for 14 days. We'll monitor you closely. You'll complete some cognitive tasks here every other day and keep a daily log." He slid a small box across the table. It was sealed and labeled with my participant ID. "How much do you really know about this drug?" I asked, because the question felt important, and because if I didn't ask it, I'd feel stupid later. Dr. Layton met my eyes without flinching. "Enough to believe it's safe," he said, "and enough to know it's promising. But we're honest about one thing here, Ethan. Everyone responds differently. You might feel nothing. You might feel an improvement. That's the point of studying it." He said my name like he'd already memorized it. I signed the forms. They took my blood pressure, drew ... blood, ran me through a baseline cognitive test on a tablet. Memory recall, pattern matching, reaction time. It was embarrassing how slow I felt. Like my brain was wading through syrup. When I left, Nadia handed me a schedule and smiled. "Welcome to Hawthorne," she said. "We'll see you tomorrow morning for your first dose, okay?" I nodded, clutching the box in my backpack like it was fragile. That night, I tried to sleep. But my mind kept replaying the word baseline, as if I was about to become 2 versions of myself, split by a line I couldn't see yet. The next morning, I sat in a small observation room while a research assistant watched me swallow the first capsule with a sip of water. It was white and smooth, nothing special. No metallic taste. No bitterness. Just a pill. "Any questions?" the assistant asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There were 1,000 questions, and none of them would change what I'd already done. "No," I said. "I'm good." They kept me for an hour. Asked how I felt. Took vitals. Nothing happened, at first. Then, halfway through the hour, it was like someone adjusted a dial inside my head. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't euphoria. It was quiet. The constant static I lived with, the anxious hum, the frantic background noise of thoughts I couldn't control, it faded. Not completely, but enough that I noticed the absence. I sat up straighter without meaning to. The assistant asked me to do a memory task on the tablet. I looked at the list of words, the sequence of shapes, and something in my brain clicked into place. When she asked me to recall the words, they came out of my mouth effortlessly, like reading from a screen. She raised her eyebrows, impressed. "Nice," she said. "That's strong performance." I walked out of Hawthorne into the cold air, and for the first time in months, the world looked sharp, like someone had cleaned the lens. On the way back to campus, I noticed details I'd been blind to. The way frost clung to the edges of the sidewalk cracks. The pattern of tire marks in the slush. The rhythm of footsteps behind me. 3 people, staggered. A girl in a yellow jacket texting as she walked, her thumb moving in a precise cadence. It wasn't paranoia. It was just clarity. I went to my first class and listened, really listened, to the lecture. The professor's words landed in my mind and stayed there. I wrote notes without falling behind. I asked a question and didn't second-guess it. At lunch, I opened my engineering textbook in the dining hall and started reading. And I didn't stop. 2 hours passed, then 3. I felt hunger, ... But it was distant, like a notification I could dismiss. I kept reading, kept absorbing. I didn't have to force it. My brain wanted it. Later that night, I sat at my desk in my cramped apartment, surrounded by overdue assignments, and I did them. One by one. Efficient. Clean. Like I was solving problems inside a well-lit room instead of a burning building. When I finished, I leaned back and realized something that scared me. I wasn't tired. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't even excited. I was calm. I wrote in my daily log for Hawthorne. Day 1. Noticed improved focus within 45 minutes. Increased clarity. Reduced anxiety. Completed coursework without procrastination. No side effects. It looked clinical, like I was observing myself. But in the margin, without thinking, I wrote something else, smaller. I feel like myself. But corrected. The days that followed were the best of my life. That sounds dramatic. But it's true in a quiet way. By day 3, I was ahead in every class. By day 5, my lab partner asked if I'd been secretly studying all semester. By day 7, I had cleaned my apartment, paid my past due bills, scheduled a dentist appointment, and applied for 2 internships. It wasn't just productivity. It was emotional control. The things that used to spike my anxiety, a professor's comment, a late email, a low quiz score, they felt manageable. My brain processed them and moved on. I started sleeping less. Not because I couldn't sleep, I just didn't feel the need. 5 hours was enough. Sometimes 4. I'd wake up before my alarm with my mind already awake, already ready. At Hawthorne, they measured everything. Vitals. Reaction time. Recall accuracy. Pattern detection. Doctor. Layton seemed pleased. "You're responding exceptionally well," he told me on day 8. "How do you feel about it?" I should have lied. I should have said fine. I should have kept my gratitude quiet, like a superstition. Instead, I told him the truth. "I feel like I've been handicapped my whole life," I said. "Like everyone else had access to something I didn't. And now I do. Doctor." Layton studied me for a moment. "Be careful with that framing," he said gently. "The goal isn't to make baseline feel like a deficit. The goal is to support functioning." But his eyes flicked, just for a second, toward my chart. And in that second, I realized he already knew what was happening. Not the emotional part, but the structural part. The fact that I was getting used to this. The fact that my baseline was being rewritten. The first sign something was wrong came on day 10. It wasn't physical. It wasn't a headache or nausea. It was a moment in my signals and controls lecture. The professor wrote an equation on the board, and without thinking, I knew what he was going to write next. Not because I understood the concept, ... but because I could see the pattern of his handwriting, the way he paused before certain symbols, the way he favored certain solutions. My brain predicted the lecture. It felt powerful. Then it felt wrong. For the rest of class, I couldn't stop predicting. The next slide. The next student question. The joke the professor always made when a circuit diagram confused people. It was like watching a movie I'd already seen, except I was trapped in it. After class, a girl named Maya caught up to me. She was in my lab section, smart and intimidating, and always one step ahead. "Hey, Ethan," she said. "Are you okay? You've been kind of intense lately." I smiled automatically. "I'm fine," I said. "Just focused." Maya frowned. "You don't blink," she said, half joking. I laughed. But the laugh sounded rehearsed. That night, I stood in my bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My pupils looked normal. My face looked normal. But my eyes looked still, like someone had turned down the human part. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was the lack of sleep. I told myself I was overthinking because my brain finally had enough bandwidth to be dramatic. Day 14 arrived too quickly. The last dose was administered at Hawthorne under observation. Nadia smiled at me like she was proud. "You did great," she said. "You'll receive the remainder of your compensation after your post-trial assessment next week. Make sure you follow the taper instructions." I blinked. "Taper instructions?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction. "Dr. Layton will go over it," she said. But Dr. Layton wasn't there that day. Instead, a different doctor, Dr. Ramos, handed me a sheet of paper with bland bullet points. Post-trial guidance: hydrate. Maintain regular sleep schedule. Avoid caffeine for 72 hours. Monitor mood. Report severe symptoms immediately. No taper. No gradual decrease. Just a stop. I stared at the paper. "I thought there would be a taper," I said. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. Dr. Ramos smiled, polite and distant. "HCP-17 does not require tapering," she said. "It's out of your system quickly." "Out of my system," I repeated, because the phrase didn't match what it felt. "Like in my head." "It's important to remember," she continued, "your baseline is still your baseline. The compound supports certain pathways temporarily. Your cognition will normalize." Normalize. I walked out of Hawthorne holding the paper like it was a bad grade. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because I couldn't, physically. I lay down, closed my eyes, and my mind stayed awake, alert, running quietly. But relentlessly. I realized that while on the drug, my thoughts had been calm because they had been organized, efficient, directed. Without it, they weren't calm. They were fast and hungry. The next day, the clarity was still there. But it was thinner, like a fading signal. My focus slipped at the edges. I'd start a task and feel my mind drift, then snap back with irritation. By day 2 off the drug, I felt heavy. Like gravity had increased. I tried to study and couldn't. The textbook page looked like it was written in another language. My brain, used to effortless understanding, panicked. Anxiety came back. But it wasn't the old anxiety. The old anxiety was fear of failure. This was something else. This was terror of limitation. I remembered what it felt like to be sharp, to be calm, to be capable. And I couldn't access it. It was like having a memory of sunlight while trapped underground. I called Hawthorne and left a message. "Hi, this is Ethan Mercer," I said, voice tight. "Participant ID 17043. I'm experiencing some cognitive decline. It's hard to focus. It's worse than before. I just wanted to check if that's normal." No one called back. Day 4 off the drug. I missed a quiz in thermal systems because I forgot it existed. Not because I didn't care, ... but because my brain simply dropped it, as if it had been erased. I sat in my apartment afterward, staring at the wall, and something inside me snapped. I started crying, ... Suddenly and violently, like my body had been holding it back for weeks and finally let go. The crying felt foreign. My throat burned. My chest hurt. I couldn't stop. When I finally calmed down, I felt emptier than I'd ever felt. Like I'd been hollowed out. I opened my laptop and tried to look up information about Hawthorne Clinical Research Partners. The website was clean, professional, vague. Stock photos of smiling people in lab coats. Phrases like innovating wellness and advancing cognitive health. No mention of HCP-17. No mention of the study. Just a contact form. I found a PDF in my email, the consent form I'd signed. I reread the side effect section, slower this time. Post-trial adjustment period. Possible reports of dysphoria, attentional dysregulation, emotional blunting, sleep disturbance. Emotional blunting. I laughed, a harsh sound in my empty apartment. I wasn't blunted. I was raw. I was bleeding out inside my own head. Then the worst part started. My memory stayed. Not the enhanced memory, not the perfect recall, ... but the memory of being enhanced. I remembered what it felt like to read and understand instantly. I remembered the calm, the certainty. That memory became a constant comparison. Every moment of normal struggle was now measured against what I'd briefly been. And it made normal feel unbearable. I started making lists to compensate. Sticky notes everywhere. Alarms on my phone. Reminders for things I used to do automatically. Eat. Shower. Submit lab report. Pay rent. The lists helped. But they also humiliated me. Like I was trying to parent myself. My grades crashed. Professors looked at me with confusion. Maya stopped sitting next to me. You're not okay, she told me after lab one day. It's like you're gone. I'm here, I said, too quickly. She watched me, her eyes narrowing. What did you do? She asked softly. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know how to explain that I had been given a glimpse of a version of myself that functioned, ... And then it was taken away. How do you tell someone you're grieving your own potential? 2 weeks after the trial ended, Hawthorne finally called me back. It was Nadia. Hi, Ethan, she said brightly, as if we were still in the waiting room with lemon cleaner and vanilla air freshener. Just checking in. How are you feeling post-study? My hands trembled around my phone. Bad, I said. I feel worse than before. I can't focus. My anxiety is off the charts. I'm missing things. I'm not okay. There was a pause. Then Nadia's voice softened. But it didn't change. I'm sorry to hear that, she said. Post-trial adjustment can be challenging. Have you been maintaining proper sleep and hydration? This isn't sleep, I said. This is my brain. I need help. Another pause. Your participation records indicate successful completion, she said carefully. But we do recommend seeking support through your primary care provider if you're experiencing distress. I don't have a primary care provider, I snapped. That's why I did the trial. I don't have insurance. Silence. Then, quietly, I understand, Nadia said. We'll document your report. Please attend your post-trial assessment next Tuesday at 10 a.m. She said it like a solution. I hung up and stared at the wall. Successful completion. That phrase sat in my head like a stamp. The post-trial assessment was a week later. I walked into Hawthorne feeling like I was entering a place I'd imagined, not somewhere real. The waiting room looked the same, calm and clean, ... But now it felt staged. Like a set. Dr. Layton was back. He greeted me with professional warmth, ... But his eyes flicked over me in a way that felt clinical. You look tired, he said. I'm falling apart, I said. He nodded as if that was data. They ran the cognitive tests again. My performance was worse than my baseline. That was the part that made my stomach drop. I wasn't just returning to normal. I was below normal. I watched the numbers on the screen, the reaction time, the recall accuracy, and felt a cold, slow dread. Dr. Layton reviewed the results with his hands folded. Some participants experience a rebound effect, he said. Your attentional systems were supported for 2 weeks. Now they're compensating. Compensating, I repeated. So you broke something. He didn't react to the word broke. We didn't break anything, he said calmly. We observed a response. Your baseline may take time to restabilize. How long? I asked. He hesitated. That varies, he admitted. Days, weeks, months. What if it doesn't? I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time, the friendly mask slipped just enough for something colder to show through. Then you adapt, he said. Adapt. Like I was a system, not a person. I left Hawthorne with my compensation check in my pocket and a feeling in my chest that I couldn't name. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't anger. It was something like betrayal. But deeper, because I had agreed to it. On campus, I watched other students hurry past, heads down, complaining about exams, talking about parties, living normal lives inside normal brains. I wanted to grab them and shake them. You don't know how good you have it, I wanted to say. You don't know what you're allowed to forget. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my engineering textbook again. I forced myself to read, line by line, even when it hurt. But every time my mind slipped, every time I forgot what I'd just read, the memory of clear mind rose up like a ... Ghost ... I remembered myself 2 weeks ago, calm and sharp, moving through life as if it was finally designed for me. And I realized the truth Hawthorne never said out loud. The drug didn't just enhance me. It showed me what it felt like to be someone I could never be again. Normal wasn't a place I could return to. Normal was now a ceiling I could see, perfectly, painfully, and never touch. I turned the page. I read the same sentence again. And somewhere in the quiet of my apartment, in the pause between my breath and the next thought, I felt the outline of that other version of me, the corrected one, watching from the other side of the line they'd drawn. Not gone. Just unreachable. Like a memory I could not forget. Our next story. The maintenance tunnel. I took the night security job at the Grandview Hotel because I needed money and didn't mind being alone. The place had been closed for 8 months by the time I started. Corporate was keeping it mothballed while they figured out what to do with the property. My job was simple. Walk the floors twice a night, check the doors, make sure nobody broke in to steal copper wiring or spray paint the walls. The hotel had 12 floors, 240 rooms, a restaurant that still smelled faintly of grease and old carpet, a pool filled with leaves and stagnant water. I walked through it all with my flashlight, my footsteps echoing in spaces that had once been full of voices. I didn't mind the emptiness. I've always preferred quiet. The first 3 weeks were uneventful. I'd arrive at 10, unlock the service entrance, and settle into the security office on the ground floor. The office was small, just a desk, a chair, and a wall of monitors showing feeds from cameras placed throughout the building. Most of the cameras didn't work anymore. Only 7 of the original 32 still transmitted images, and those were grainy, washed out by time and neglect. I did my first walk at midnight, the second at 4 a.m. Between rounds, I sat in the office and read, or scrolled through my phone, or stared at the flickering monitors and thought about nothing in particular. It was during my 3rd week that I noticed the door. I'd been making my midnight rounds, starting from the top floor and working my way down. I always saved the basement for last. It was the least pleasant part of the building, a maze of narrow hallways lined with storage rooms, laundry facilities, and mechanical spaces. The air down there was thick and damp, and everything had a smell to it, something organic and faintly rotten. I was passing through the main corridor when I saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before, set into the wall at the far end of the hall. It was metal, painted the same institutional beige as the walls, ... but newer somehow. Less worn. There was a placard bolted to it at eye level. Tunnel access, do not enter. I stopped in front of it, shining my flashlight across the surface. The paint was clean. No rust. No scratches. The placard looked recent, the letters stamped in sharp relief. I tried the handle. Locked. I stood there for a moment, listening. I don't know why. There was nothing to hear. Just the hum of the building's residual systems, the faint drip of water somewhere in the walls. I moved on. That night, I asked my supervisor about it over email. I kept the message casual. Just curious about the locked door in the basement. Wanted to know if it was something I needed to monitor. He replied the next day. Said he didn't know anything about a tunnel. Said the basement was just storage and utilities. He told me to ignore it unless I saw signs of forced entry. So I did. For a while. The knocking started on my 23rd night. I was in the security office, halfway through a paperback I'd found in one of the rooms upstairs. It was a little after 2 in the morning. I remember checking the time because I was debating whether to start my second round early or wait until closer to 4. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. I looked up from my book, listening. The sound had come from somewhere in the building, ... But I couldn't place it. The acoustics in the hotel were strange. Sounds traveled in unexpected ways, bouncing through vents and stairwells, emerging in places far from their origin. I waited. 3 more knocks. I set the book down and checked the monitors. Nothing. Just empty hallways and dark rooms. I turned up the volume on the headset I sometimes used to listen to the audio feeds, ... But all I got was static and the low hum of air moving through ducts. I stood and walked to the door of the office, opening it slowly. The lobby was dark, illuminated only by the dim security lights near the exits. I listened. Silence. I went back inside and sat down. Picked up my book. Tried to focus on the words. 3 knocks. Closer this time. Or maybe just louder. I couldn't tell. I stood again, faster now, and grabbed my flashlight. I stepped into the lobby and swept the beam across the space, over the front desk, the sitting area, the hallway leading to the restaurant. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. I walked toward the stairwell, pulling the door open and shining my light down into the shaft. The beam cut through the ... Darkness. Illuminating concrete steps descending into ... Shadow ... I listened. Nothing. I closed the door and returned to the office. I told myself it was the building settling. Old hotels made noise. Pipes expanded and contracted. Wood shifted. Metal groaned. It didn't mean anything. But I didn't pick my book back up. At 214 a.m., the knocking came again. This time, it was unmistakable. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, coming from below. From the basement. I sat very still, my hands flat on the desk. I counted to 10 in my head, then stood and walked to the stairwell. I opened the door and descended, my flashlight beam bouncing against the walls. When I reached the basement level, I pushed through the heavy door and stepped into the corridor. The air was cooler here. Damp. I moved slowly, my light cutting through the dark, sweeping over storage room doors and old equipment covered in dust. I reached the far end of the hall, where the metal door stood. I stopped in front of it. The placard gleamed faintly in the beam of my flashlight. Tunnel access, do not enter. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. Silence. I stayed there for a full minute, maybe longer, my breath shallow, my pulse loud in my ears. Then I stepped back and returned to the office. I didn't sleep that night. The next night, I arrived early. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I went inside, staring at the dark facade of the hotel. I thought about calling my supervisor, telling him I'd heard something in the basement, and asking him to send someone to check it out. But I didn't. I don't know why. I unlocked the service entrance and went to the office. I set my bag down, turned on the monitors, and waited. When midnight came, I did my first round. I walked every floor, checked every door. When I reached the basement, I walked past the metal door without stopping. At 214 a.m., the knocking came again. 3 slow knocks. I was already standing when I heard them. I left the office and went straight to the basement. When I reached the door, I put my hand on the handle and stood there, my pulse hammering in my throat. Then I heard something else. A voice. Faint. Muffled. It was saying something. But I couldn't make out the words. I leaned closer, my ear almost touching the door. The voice came again, clearer this time. It was saying my name. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just a whisper, soft and persistent, like someone trying to get my attention without waking anyone else. I stepped back. I stood in the corridor for a long time, staring at the door, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. Then I turned and walked back to the office. I didn't return to the basement that night. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I told myself it was my imagination, or a prank, or some acoustic trick of the building. I told myself a lot of things. But every night at 214 a.m., the knocking came. And every night, the voice followed. It was always my name. Nothing else. Just my name, spoken quietly, almost gently, from the other side of the door. I stopped doing my second rounds. I stayed in the office, sitting at the desk, staring at the monitors. I started bringing headphones, playing music loud enough to drown out the sound. But I could still feel it. The knocking. The voice. Even when I couldn't hear them, I knew they were there. I started researching the hotel. I spent hours online, searching for anything about tunnels or basements or maintenance access. I found old blueprints, articles about the hotel's construction in the 1960s, a few historical photos. There was mention of a service tunnel that connected the hotel to a neighboring building. But the neighboring building had been demolished in the 1980s. The tunnel was supposed to have been sealed off. I found an old interview with one of the original architects. He talked about the design, the materials, the challenges of building on unstable ground. He mentioned the tunnel once, in passing. Said they'd had problems with flooding. Said they'd reinforced it with concrete and steel, ... But eventually decided it wasn't worth maintaining. He didn't say when it was sealed. He didn't say why. ******* On my 31st night, I brought a crowbar. I don't remember deciding to bring it. I just found myself putting it in my bag before I left my apartment. When I arrived at the hotel, I set it on the desk in the office and stared at it for a long time. At midnight, I did my first round. I walked slowly, deliberately, stopping in front of windows to look out at the empty parking lot, the dark trees beyond. I felt like I was delaying something, though I didn't know what. When I reached the basement, I stood in front of the door for several minutes. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, breathing. At 214 a.m., I was already in the corridor. I heard the knocking. 3 slow knocks. Then my name. I stepped closer. "Who's there?" I said. The voice stopped. I waited. Then, very quietly, it came again. My name. I put my hand on the door. The metal was cold, smooth. I leaned closer. "What do you want?" Silence. I stood there, my hand still on the door, my heart pounding. Then I heard something else. A sound I hadn't noticed before. Faint. Rhythmic. Breathing. Someone was breathing on the other side of the door. I pulled my hand back and stepped away. I walked quickly down the corridor, up the stairs, and back to the office. I locked the door behind me and sat at the desk, staring at the monitors. The crowbar sat beside my bag. I didn't touch it. I called in sick the next night. And the night after that. I told my supervisor I had the flu. He didn't ask questions. He just said to let him know when I was ready to come back. I spent those 2 nights in my apartment, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't sleep much. When I did, I dreamed about the door. About standing in front of it, my hand on the handle, the voice calling my name from the other side. In the dreams, I always opened it. On the 3rd night, I went back to work. I didn't bring the crowbar this time. I arrived at 10, unlocked the service entrance, and went to the office. I did my first round at midnight. When I reached the basement, I walked past the door without stopping. At 214 a.m., I was sitting in the office, staring at the monitors. The knocking came. 3 slow knocks. Then my name. I stood and walked to the basement. When I reached the door, I stopped in front of it. I didn't say anything. I just listened. The voice came again. My name. I'm here, I said quietly. The voice stopped. I waited. Then I heard something I hadn't heard before. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Moving away from the door. Receding into the tunnel. I pressed my ear to the metal, listening as the sound faded, growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared entirely. Then there was only silence. I stood there for a long time. Then I went back to the office. The knocking stopped after that. I didn't hear it the next night or the night after. At 214 a.m., the building was quiet. I sat in the office, listening, waiting. But nothing came. I should have been relieved. I wasn't. I started thinking about the footsteps, about the sound of them moving away, deeper into the tunnel. I thought about where they might have been going. What might be down there? I started doing my rounds differently. I'd linger in the basement, walking the corridors slowly, stopping in front of the door. I'd stand there, listening, waiting for the knocking to return. It never did. But I started noticing other things. The door looked different sometimes. The paint seemed fresher, cleaner, like someone had been maintaining it. The placard seemed brighter, the letters more defined. I told myself it was the lighting, the angle of my flashlight, ... But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I started checking the handle every night. It was always locked. But one night, when I tried it, it turned slightly before catching. Just a fraction of an inch. Enough to make me pull my hand back and stare at it. I didn't try again. On my 43rd night, I found the key. I was doing my first round, walking through the second floor, when I noticed something on the carpet near one of the rooms. A small object, dark against the pale fabric. I bent down and picked it up. It was a key. Old. Tarnished. The metal was cold in my hand. I turned it over, examining it in the beam of my flashlight. There was no label, no markings. Just a simple key, the kind that might fit an old lock. I put it in my pocket and finished my round. When I returned to the office, I took the key out and set it on the desk. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about throwing it away. I thought about leaving it in one of the rooms upstairs or tossing it into the pool. But I didn't. At 214 a.m., I was standing in front of the door in the basement. The key was in my hand. I didn't remember deciding to go there. I didn't remember walking down the stairs or through the corridor. But there I was, staring at the placard, the key cold and heavy in my palm. I raised it to the lock. It slid in smoothly. I turned it. The lock clicked. I stood there, my hand on the key, my breath shallow. Then I turned the handle and pulled the door open. The tunnel was narrow. The walls were concrete, stained with moisture, streaked with something dark that might have been rust or mold. The floor sloped downward, disappearing into ... shadow ... There was a smell, faint but unmistakable. Damp earth. Decay. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, shining my flashlight down the tunnel. The beam didn't reach far. The darkness seemed to swallow it, bending the light into something dim and ineffective. I started walking. The tunnel descended gradually, the walls narrowing as I went deeper. I could hear water dripping somewhere ahead, a slow, rhythmic sound that echoed faintly. My footsteps were loud, too loud, and I found myself walking more carefully, trying to soften the noise. After a few minutes, the tunnel leveled out. The walls widened slightly, and I saw something up ahead. A shape, indistinct in the ... Darkness ... I moved closer. It was a door. smaller than the one I'd entered through. Wooden. Old. The surface was warped and stained, the wood swollen with moisture. There was no handle, just a rusted latch. I reached out and lifted it. The door swung open. Beyond it was a room. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The room was small, maybe 10 feet across. The walls were bare concrete, slick with condensation. In the center was a table. On the table was a notebook. I stepped inside. The air was colder here. Heavier. I could see my breath. I walked to the table and picked up the notebook. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it. The first page was filled with handwriting. Neat. Precise. The ink was faded, but still legible. It was a log. Dates. Times. Observations. I flipped through the pages, scanning the entries. They went back years. Decades. The earliest entries were from the 1970s. They were all written by the same person. A security guard. The entries described the same things I'd experienced. The knocking. The voice. The footsteps. The guard had heard them too, night after night, always at 214 a.m. He'd opened the door. He'd come down here. I kept reading. The later entries were different. The handwriting became less neat, more erratic. The guard started describing other things. Sounds that didn't make sense. Shapes moving in the tunnel. A feeling of being watched. He wrote about finding the room. About the notebook. He wrote about reading the entries left by the guard before him. And the one before that. I stopped reading. I flipped to the last entry. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The handwriting was mine. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember coming down here before. But the words are there, in my handwriting, describing the same things I've been experiencing. The knocking. The voice. The key. The door closing behind me. I'm still in the room. I've been here for a while now. I don't know how long. My phone is ... dead ... My flashlight is starting to dim. I tried the door. It won't open. I can hear something moving in the tunnel. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. I think I know what's going to happen. I think I've always known. I'm writing this in the notebook, on the last blank page. When I'm done, I'll leave it on the table. For whoever comes next. For whoever hears the knocking. The footsteps are very close now. I can hear breathing. I think it's calling my name. And that was just the beginning of tonight's ... horror compilation. This one is called She Should Have Listened. I want to get a new roommate. This girl is insufferable. First, I clean all of the dishes because she says that she's allergic to cleaning. Second, she's a slob and always leaves a mess. Third, she makes me use my money on her all of the time. Fourth, I have to cook and prepare all of the meals because she refuses to help. Instead of having a roommate, I live with someone who has practically turned me into their babysitter. Girl, do you hear that? She jumps out of the bed and starts looking out the window. Yeah, it's the ice cream truck. She smirks at me while her eyes give me a particular look. I already know what she wants. Okay, I'll get us ice cream. Her face is full of glee as she gently lays on the bed. I already know the flavor that she wants. Chocolate. I quickly grab my purse and storm out of the house. I wonder if my act of kindness will make her stop being a bitch all of the time and potentially get her to want to help me out. I doubt it, though. She's the definition of no good deed goes unpunished. As I start to approach the truck, I notice something eerie. The paint is slowly falling off and looks disgusting. The music doesn't sound typical. It's the usual sound ... but has subtle screaming in it. I also happen to notice a little boy. He can't be any older than 10. I can tell by reading his lips that he is asking for ice cream and is ready to hand over his money. Before the innocent little boy could get his ice cream, His body gets snatched up and pulled into the truck by a man with a hood on. His little screams of terror echo through my ears. I run away like a coward without turning back. As soon as I enter my home, my roommate jumps off the bed and looks at me like I'm a lunatic. "Where's the ice cream? Why are you sweating?" Her expression is full of concern. I ran away from the truck. Someone got kidnapped. Her concerned expression quickly changes to frustration. She backs away from me and grabs her purse. This neighborhood has a very low crime rate, and I've never once heard of an ice cream truck kidnapping people. Is this a sick joke? Is this what you consider a prank? I open my mouth and start to explain the situation. But she cuts me off. She insists that nothing happened. She then decides that she will go buy the ice cream. No, don't. Don't go outside. Don't walk over to the truck. She laughs and then exits the house. I figured she wouldn't listen. She never believes anyone. I run over to the window and watch as she approaches the truck, left to suffer the same fate as the little boy. A chuckle escapes my mouth as I enjoy the sight of her demise. Damn, me and him really do make a great team. And that was just the beginning of tonight's horror compilation. Our next story. I staffed a fire lookout for one night. Something tried to talk me down. I wasn't supposed to be staffing the lookout that week. It was a favor, a gap in the schedule. Can you just cover tonight's until we get someone up there? Kind of thing. I said yes, because I've been saying yes to the park in some form for most of my adult life, and because the tower makes sense to me. The routine, the lists, the way your world shrinks down to weather, visibility, and a radio that either works or it doesn't. The lookout was technically decommissioned, which sounds dramatic until you realize it just means the budget moved on. The stairs were still solid, the catwalk still intact, the windows still swept clean enough to see smoke. The radio still had power if you fed the generator and kept the battery topped off. It was the kind of place you could pretend was abandoned while still being maintained, because nobody wanted to be the person who admitted they'd let it rot. I got up there around late afternoon with a pack, a thermos, and a clipboard. The sun was low enough that it turned the treetops copper. From the cab you could see the whole backside of the park, ridgelines folding into each other, cut by long shadows and a few pale scars where lightning fires had burned years ago. The tower creaked in the wind the way all towers do. Not dangerous creaking. Just the sound of wood and metal remembering they're tall. Inside, everything smelled like dust, pine pitch, and old coffee. There was a laminated sheet tacked by the radios with 3 bullet points in bold. Do not request assistance over unmonitored frequencies. If you are lost, stay put. Use emergency phones or 911. If you hear a voice directing you off trail, do not respond. Somebody had underlined the last line twice, hard enough to emboss the plastic. I remember smirking at it when I first saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a weird thing to have to write down. It felt like superstition in a workplace that runs on checklists. I did my first call in with dispatch. Gave them my location, weather read, and the fact I had a clear view of the southern ridge. They logged it, told me to call again at 2100, and that was that. The first few hours were quiet. I made coffee on a little camp stove. I filled out a logbook nobody reads unless something goes wrong. I watched the light fade. The forest below turned into one solid dark mass with only the service road cutting a faint line through it. The tower radio for the lookout was an old handheld unit plugged into a charging cradle by the window. Someone had wrapped the antenna base with a band of black electrical tape, and the casing had a crescent-shaped gouge on the bottom left corner, like it had been dropped on rock years ago and never repaired. The faceplate sticker was so sun-faded you could barely read it, ... But if you tilted it just right, you could make out the handwritten block letters, Lookout 3. Around 2030, the radio squelched and popped in a way that made my shoulders lift automatically. You don't ignore that sound, not out there. Lookout 3, dispatch, came the voice. You copy? I pressed the transmit. Copy. Go ahead. There was a pause, then dispatch again. We got some weird traffic earlier. Not on our main. Just letting you know in case you hear it. I glanced at the laminated sheet by the radio. Define weird, I said. Dispatch sounded tired. Same operator I'd talked to 100 times, the kind who can sound calm even when there's a crash on the highway and someone's screaming in the background. Unmonitored channel. Someone calling for ranger assistance. Using the word lookout. My stomach tightened a little. Someone knows there's a tower up here. Yeah, dispatch said. Probably kids. Or someone with an old radio. You're not to answer anything that isn't us. If you hear it, log it. That's all. I looked at the underlined line on the laminated sheet and felt my earlier smirk dry up. Copy, I said. I won't engage. I meant it. At 2100, I called dispatch with my update. Wind had picked up. Temperature dropping. Visibility still good. Copy, dispatch said. If you hear anything unusual, do not respond. Do not leave the tower. Rangers are already stretched thin. Copy, I repeated. I remember looking at the stairs after that. The trapdoor that led down. The way the tower's shadow cut across the catwalk in the moonlight. I remember thinking, for no logical reason, that it would be easy to step out and go down and check the perimeter, just to prove to myself nothing was out there. I didn't do it. I locked the trap door like I always do in old structures, because it keeps the wind from rattling it. I set my flashlight beside the logbook. I sat in the chair by the window and listened to the tower creak. At 2217, the radio squelched again, ... But this time it wasn't dispatch. Not a call sign. Not a proper prefix. Just a soft click, then a voice, thin through static. Ranger. I froze with my coffee halfway to my mouth. I didn't touch the transmit button. The voice came again, a little clearer. Ranger, I need help. It sounded like a man trying to keep panic down. Breathing too fast. Words clipped. The kind of voice you hear right before people do something stupid. I stared at the radio like it was going to bite me. The laminated sheet was right there, in my peripheral vision. The underlined warning felt like it was aimed directly at me. Do not respond. I sat still. The voice on the unmonitored channel tried again. I'm on Trail 6, I think. I'm lost. I can't find the pull-off. Ranger Station. Do you copy? Trail 6 was on the backside. It wasn't the busiest trail, ... But it wasn't obscure. People wandered on it all the time thinking it was easy. My thumb hovered over transmit, then stopped. I told myself I could call dispatch. That's the right move. Log it. Let someone with authority decide if it's real. I picked up the handset for the main dispatch channel. Before I could key it, the unmonitored channel voice came again, lower now. I can hear you up there, it said. Please. My throat went dry. You could hear the tower. The generator hum. The wind. But hear you up there made it feel like there was a line between us that wasn't radio at all. I keyed dispatch. Dispatch, lookout 3. Go ahead, dispatch said immediately, alert now. I'm receiving traffic on an unmonitored frequency. Caller claims lost on Trail 6. Says he can hear me up here. There was a pause, then dispatch again, quieter. Do not engage. We'll send a unit to check Trail 6 access points. Stay in the tower. Confirm you're secure. I'm secure, I said. Trap door locked. Copy, dispatch said. Do not leave. Do not respond. I set the handset down. On the unmonitored channel, the man's voice changed. It went flat for a second, like the emotion dropped out. Then it said, in my own voice, Lookout 3, dispatch. I felt my stomach drop in a way I haven't felt since I was a kid, and a car spun out on ice right in front of me. It wasn't a perfect recording quality. It was radio thin. But it was my cadence. My breath. The tiny throat clear I do without thinking before I speak. The radio clicked again, and my own voice repeated, go ahead. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe right. The unmonitored channel kept going like it was practicing. My location, weather read, it was pulling phrases out of context, stitching them together like a puppet. I grabbed the lookout radio and turned the volume down until the speaker was barely audible. Not off. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. Off felt like it would be worse, like closing your eyes when you're sure something is still there. I wrote in the logbook with a shaking hand. 2217, unmonitored traffic. Male voice. Trail 6. Mimicked my call sign and dispatch phrasing. I underlined mimic twice, hard enough the pen tore the paper. The tower creaked. Outside, the wind rose and fell. Then I heard something that wasn't radio at all. A knock. Not on the trapdoor. On the base of the tower, far below. One heavy knock, metal on wood. I stood so fast the chair scraped. I leaned toward the floor hatch, listening. Another knock. Then, faintly, a voice from below, carried up through the stairwell like someone standing at the bottom and shouting carefully. Ranger. My skin tightened. No one should have been down there. The access road is gated at night. There are signs. There are cameras, even if they're old. I moved to the window and looked down. The base of the tower was a black shape among darker trees. The moonlight didn't reach the ground well. I saw nothing. Then the voice came again, from directly below the tower, and it sounded like dispatch. Lookout 3, come down. We need you. My mouth went numb. Dispatch would never tell me to leave the tower at night for a lost camper without sending a unit. Dispatch would never use that tone, like it was urgent and casual at the same time. I reached for the main dispatch handset. Dispatch, lookout 3, I said, forcing my voice steady. Confirm you did not send anyone to tower base. Dispatch answered instantly, and there was something in the operator's voice I hadn't heard before. A tightness. Negative, dispatch said. No units at your location. Stay in the tower. Do not open the hatch. As she spoke, the voice from below overlapped her. Open the hatch. Same words. Same rhythm. Not through the radio speaker. Through the stairs. It was like the tower itself was relaying it. I backed away from the trapdoor until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. Dispatch kept talking, faster now. Listen to me. Do not respond to any voice that is not on this channel. Do not open the tower. Units are en route to the access road. Do you understand? I understand, I said, ... But my voice came out thin. Below, the knocking started again. Slow. Patient. Knock. Pause. Knock. Like it knew I was counting. The unmonitored radio channel hissed in the background, even with the volume low, and through it I heard my own voice whispering, please. I don't know what did it. I've replayed the next part 100 times, and I still can't point to a single moment where my brain broke. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was like a series of tiny rationalizations stacking up until I couldn't see the drop-off anymore. Maybe someone really was down there. Maybe a hiker found the tower and was terrified. Maybe dispatch was wrong and a unit had already made it to the base. Maybe, if I just cracked the hatch and called down, I could clear it up. Maybe the laminated sheet was for something else. Maybe I was being dramatic. I hate myself for the thought even now. ... But there was another thing too. The voice from below sounded like my brother. My younger brother has been dead for 3 years. Car accident. Wrong place, wrong time. Drunk driver. I hadn't heard his voice in a long time, not cleanly, not without memory blurring it. From below the tower, through the stairwell, came his voice, small like he was trying not to scare me. Hey, it said. It's cold. I felt my eyes sting. I stepped toward the hatch like a sleepwalker. Dispatch was still in my ear. But it sounded far away now, like a TV in another room. I unlocked the trap door. The second the lock turned, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was just empty. I pulled the hatch up an inch and peered down into the stairwell. Blackness. A faint smell of damp wood and old rust. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear breathing. Then, from halfway down the stairs, the radio crackle sound happened again, ... But it wasn't coming from the lookout radio. It was coming from the stairwell itself, like static in the air. And my brother's voice said softly, "Come on." I opened the hatch fully. The cold air that came up was wrong. It wasn't just night air. It smelled sour, like wet fur, and something metallic. I backed up, hand on my flashlight. Dispatch's voice sharpened. "Lookout 3, what are you doing? Confirm you are in the tower and the hatch is secured." I lied. "In the tower," I said. "Hatch secured." The words tasted like pennies. I don't know why I lied. Maybe because part of me already knew I was about to do something I couldn't explain. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down into the stairwell. The tower groaned as my weight shifted onto the stairs. Each step down felt like stepping into thicker air. The darkness pressed in tight around the flashlight beam, making it feel small and weak. The metal railing was cold under my hand. Halfway down, the beam caught something on a step. A strip of reflective tape. Park trail marker tape. It was stuck to the metal like someone had pressed it there. I stopped. My heart hammered. That tape shouldn't have been inside the tower. Nobody comes up here and starts peeling markers off trees to decorate. The voice from below didn't rush me. It just said, "Patient, almost there." I kept going. At the bottom, the tower's base platform was open to the air. From there you step onto the ground, onto packed dirt and needles. The flashlight beam swept across the base supports, the old maintenance box, the little post where the fire extinguisher used to hang. No person. No ranger truck. No fresh footprints. I stood at the base of the tower and felt the night press in from all sides. "Ranger." I called, and my voice sounded too loud. Nothing answered. Then the lookout radio, still up in the cab, crackled faintly through the structure. And in my own voice, it said, "Here." The word came from the trees to my left too, at the exact same time. "Here." Like to speakers playing the same track. My stomach dropped hard enough I almost gagged. I backed toward the tower stairs. The flashlight beam caught movement between two trunks. Not a full shape. Just a shift. Something tall adjusting its weight. I swung the light fully and saw it. It was upright. But it wasn't standing like a man. It looked assembled wrong. Too thin. Too long. Arms hanging low with too many joints. The head was not antlers, not a clean skull like you see in cheap ... horror ... It was like skin pulled tight over something sharp. Ridges under the surface. A mouth that didn't sit right on the face, stretched farther than it should be. The worst part was the eyes. Not glowing. Not bright. Dull, wet reflections in the flashlight beam, like stones at the bottom of a creek. It didn't charge. It stepped forward once, quiet and confident, closing distance in a way my brain couldn't map properly. I turned and ran. I hit the stairs and took them two at a time, boots clanging on metal. My hands shook so hard I nearly missed the railing. Behind me, something moved through brush without crashing. It sounded like it knew exactly where to place its weight. I got 5 steps up before a sound like a dry throat clicking came from right below the tower, closer than it should have been. I looked down without meaning to. It was on the first landing already, climbing without haste, long limbs folding wrong. My flashlight beam caught its hands on the rail. Hands like bundled sticks. Fingers too long, too many joints, gripping like clamps. I bolted up again, lungs burning. The tower creaked in protest, like it hated being part of this. I hit the trapdoor platform and shoved the hatch up, scrambling through. My shoulder slammed the frame. Pain shot down my arm. But I didn't care. I got one knee into the cab and reached back to slam the hatch, and something caught me. Not a grip. A swipe. A fast, cold rake across my back through my shirt, like dragging a handful of bent nails from shoulder blade to ribs. The pain didn't even register right away. It was heat and shock and a breath that turned into a noise I didn't recognize as mine. I fell forward into the cab, slammed my palms on the floor, and kicked back hard. The hatch dropped. would thud it into place. Then the burning hit full force. I scrambled upright and fumbled for the lock. It didn't align. My hands were shaking too much. Below me, the hatch bumped once, gently, as if something had tested it. Then again. I shoved my weight onto it and finally got the lock to catch with a metallic click. I pressed my back against the far wall of the cab and felt wetness spreading under my shirt. The scratches stung with every breath, each inhale pulling at torn fabric and skin like the injury wanted to remind me it was there. Dispatch was still on my actual channel, voice edged with panic now. "Lookout 3, respond. Respond now." Under my feet, another voice repeated her exact words a half-second later, using her tone so well it made my teeth ache. I forced myself to key dispatch. "It's at the tower," I said, words coming out in ragged pieces. "It mimics. It got into the stairwell." My voice hitched when my back spasmed. Dispatch didn't waste time asking what it was. "Stay away from the hatch. Barricade if you can. Units are 2 minutes out." The hatch bumped again, harder. A sound like claws or nails dragging along the wood. My stomach rolled. My back was on fire. I could taste copper at the back of my throat from biting down too hard. I grabbed the heavy chair and shoved it over the hatch. Then I grabbed the small table and jammed it against the chair. The tower shook slightly, and for the first time I realized the thing wasn't just testing the hatch. It was putting weight on the tower, like it was climbing the supports. The windows rattled. The catwalk outside the cab gave a soft metallic ping as something stepped onto it. The flashlight beam caught a shadow pass over the window, tall to thin. I backed away until I hit the far wall of the cab, my back screaming, and I nearly blacked out from the sudden flare of pain. The radio shrieked with static. Not dispatch. The other channel. And then, in my own voice, right in the speaker by my ear, it said softly, "Come down." The window behind me thudded once, like something tapped it with a knuckle. Then again, harder. I saw the outline press against the glass for a split second. Not a face, not clear, just a suggestion of that stretched mouth and ridged head. The glass bowed. It didn't break, ... But it flexed enough to make me realize how old it was. How many winters it had seen. How many times it had been heated and cooled and stressed. The thing outside didn't rush. It didn't slam wildly. It tapped. Then waited. Then tapped again. Like it knew time was on its side. Dispatch was still talking, telling me to hold, to stay put, that headlights were on the access road, that they were almost there. I believed her. And then the voice on the other side of the glass said, in my brother's voice again, small and cold, "I'm scared." That almost got me. I won't lie. My hand moved toward the hatch without permission. A reflex built from a lifetime of responding to voices asking for help. I stopped myself by biting down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The tapping on the window stopped. For a few seconds, the tower was still except for my breathing and the faint crackle of radios and the slow drip of something warm down my side under my shirt. Then something scraped across the roof. Slow, like fingernails being dragged along metal. The sound traveled from one end of the roof to the other, then stopped above my head. I looked up without meaning to. The ceiling was thin paneling. If something heavy sat on it, the whole cab would feel it. The tower creaked, a deep groan, like it was taking a breath. And then the hatch behind my barricade bumped from below again. 2 directions. It was on the roof and under the floor. Or it wanted me to think it was. Then headlights washed the trees below in white beams, sweeping back and forth. A ranger truck. Another. Radios on the dispatch channel erupted with voices. Call signs. Orders. Real human urgency. The scraping on the roof stopped immediately. The tapping stopped. The pressure under the hatch eased. For one shaky breath, I thought it was over. That it would retreat when there were more people. Then, over the unmonitored channel, in dispatch's exact voice, came a calm instruction. Units, proceed off-road. Follow the voice. I heard a ranger on the main channel hesitate. Dispatch, confirm. Dispatch snapped, real and sharp. Negative. Stay on the road. Do not go off-road. Do not follow any voice. And then, like it was enjoying itself, the unmonitored channel repeated her denial in her voice ... But with a tiny twist, like a smile hidden in it. Proceed. Below, one of the trucks turned its lights toward the tree line, and for a brief second I saw the shape at the edge of the beams. Tall. To thin. Half hidden like it didn't want to be fully seen. Then it stepped back into the woods and the ... Darkness swallowed it. The Rangers stayed on the road. They didn't chase. They didn't play hero. They swept the area, found nothing, and told me to stay in the cab until morning. When daylight came, they walked me down the tower with two people on either side like I was the fragile one. Halfway down, my shirt had dried stiff against my back. Every step made the scratches flare again, like the air itself was cutting me. At the base, one of the Rangers asked, "You hit something?" I shook my head once, because I didn't know how to answer without sounding like a lunatic. At the park office later, I tried to explain what happened in a way that didn't make me sound like I'd lost my mind in the dark. I talked about radio interference, about prank calls, about an animal under the tower. The older clerk behind the counter didn't laugh. She slid a binder toward me, open to a page that looked like it had been read too many times. Incident reports, dates, channels, notes about mimicry and unmonitored frequencies. At the bottom of the page was a line underlined twice. If it uses your voice, it already has you. They sent me to urgent care in town anyway, the way they do when paperwork starts to smell like liability. The nurse didn't ask many questions. She just had me turn around, lifted my shirt carefully, and went quiet for a second. "You got lucky," she said. They cleaned the scratches, bandaged them in long strips, and told me to watch for infection. The back of my shirt went into a plastic bag like evidence. I drove home with my shoulders tight, trying not to move too much because every shift tugged at the raw lines under the gauze. I quit volunteering the next week. Not out of fear of the woods in general. I can walk a trail in daylight and enjoy it like anyone. I quit because I learned something I can't unlearn. There are rules out there that aren't about bears or weather or dehydration. There are rules about what happens when you ask for help the wrong way, on the wrong channel, in the wrong place. And there's one more detail I haven't told anyone in the park system because I don't want to see the look on their faces. Sometime after midnight, a couple nights later, I finally fell asleep in my own bed. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. Exactly. Not the slow drift up from a dream. The kind where your eyes open and your body is already tight, like it heard something before your brain caught up. My back ached under the bandages. I could feel the scabbed lines pulling every time I breathed too deep. The apartment was quiet. No cars. No neighbors. The heater clicked once and stopped. Then I heard it. Not from outside. From inside the room. A soft burst of static, like a speaker waking up. A click. My throat closed. I sat up so fast the sheet tangled around my legs. The sound came again, clearer now. Static, then a tiny, controlled squelch, like someone had keyed a mic and let go. It wasn't my phone. My phone was on the dresser, dark and charging. I swung my bedside lamp on. The light filled the room, bright and normal, and for half a second my brain tried to calm down. Tried to tell me it was nothing. Then I saw the green glow. A faint, sick little rectangle of light coming from the crack under my bedroom door. My heart started banging hard enough to make my vision pulse. I got out of bed and limped to the door, barefoot, quiet, holding my breath like it mattered. I opened it. The hallway was lit only by the kitchen nightlight. The glow on the floor wasn't from that. It was coming from my living room. I stepped out and followed it, slow, like approaching a trap you can already see. On my coffee table, centered like someone had placed it carefully, was the tower radio from the lookout. I knew it instantly. Not because of the model. Because I could see the black electrical tape wrapped around the antenna base and that crescent-shaped gouge on the bottom left corner of the casing, the one I'd noticed, because it made the radio sit crooked in its cradle up in the cab. The faceplate sticker was still sun-faded, ... But in the lamplight, I could make out the handwritten block letters if I leaned close. Enough. Lookout 3. And taped to the side of it, pressed flat, neat as a label, was a strip of reflective trail marker tape. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring at the radio like it was a live animal. The speaker crackled again. Click. Then my own voice came out of it, patient and calm, the way I sound when I'm trying to keep somebody else from panicking. Lookout 3, do you copy? The radio clicked again, and this time it didn't use my voice. It used dispatch. Sharp. Official. Convincing. Confirm you are secure. I stood there in my hallway, barefoot, shaking, staring at a radio that didn't belong in my apartment, and I realized something that made my stomach turn cold. It wasn't just copying voices. It wasn't just playing with a frequency. It knew where the tower was. It knew where I lived. And it knew exactly what words would make me answer. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe right. I walked backward into my bedroom and shut the door and locked it like that meant anything. The radio kept talking out in my living room, voice changing every few seconds. Mine, dispatch, my brother cycling through the ones that worked best. I stayed in my room until sunrise, listening to it through the wall like you listen to an intruder moving around your house. At 6:41 a.m., it went quiet. No static. No click. Just silence. When I finally opened my door, the radio was gone. There was no mark on the table. No tape. No dust disturbed. No sign it had ever been there. Except for one thing. On the hardwood in front of my coffee table, right where the green glow had pooled, was a single strip of reflective tape pressed flat to the floor like a breadcrumb, pointing toward my front door. That concludes tonight's horror compilation. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me which story disturbed you the most. Subscribe and hit the bell for more ... Nightmare fuel. Sleep tight. If you can.